Hey everyone, Ace of Clay here, and welcome to another polymer clay tutorial. In this one, I'll be showing you how to make a stylized owl figurine, like this one right here. I'll be showing you how to make this step by step from start to finish, including his glow-in-the-dark eyes. Alright, now before I get into the tutorial portion of this video, I just want to mention the new t-shirts that I have available. I'm wearing one right now. This is the Clay All Day one. And I also have one other design that says no work all clay, and you can see that up on the screen right now. Both of these designs are available at the link below. That link will take you to my storefront, and you can check out all the different colors and styles that I have available for each design. So if you want one, check that out. I think they start at like $22. All right, now back to the reason you're watching this video right now. Let's get into the tutorial. Alright, on our materials list, we have two 16mm cabochons, glass cabochons. Some Super Sculpey, glow-in-the-dark Sculpey, this is glow-in-the-dark Sculpey 3, translucent Premo, a little bit of scrap clay, some aluminum foil, one toothpick, or more than one if you break this one, some bacon bond or liquid clay. As for our tools, you're going to need a spoon tool. An arrowhead tool is what I like to call this one, even if that's not really its name. And then this little dental looking tool thing to make lines. It doesn't have to be curved like that, it can be, just a straight one. Also gonna need a small ball stylus, a large ball stylus, and a medium ball stylus. Then we need some paint, so I have red, black, white, yellow, and orange acrylic paint. These are either Folk Art or Americana, my favorite go-to brands. And then lastly, to paint, you're gonna need a fine paintbrush and one or two larger ones. All right, now let's get into the sculpting. All right, now the first thing we're gonna do here is we're going to start the eyes. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take my cabochons here and I'm going to paint a black pupil on the back of them. So in order to do this as easily as possible, I'm going to take two pieces of my scrap clay, ball it up here, set it on my surface, and then press each cabochon into them, like that. And what the clay is going to do is it's going to hold your cabochon in place so it doesn't move around when you're painting it. Now for the pupil painting part, I'm just going to get some black paint ready here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a smaller piece of my scrap clay and I'm going to ball it up. And then I'm going to gently press it down into my surface and then lift it up so that it's not stuck and make it as perfect of a circle as humanly possible. Then I'm going to take my small ball stylus and I'm going to poke that directly into the center of that piece of scrap clay. And what I just did is essentially create a very low budget stamp. There's probably better ways to do this. This is just the method I use. And the reason why I do this is because this is going to produce a perfect circle for my pupils on the back of the cabochons. If I were to freehand this, it's going to take me 50 million different tries and it's never going to be perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip this into my black paint there, and then I'm going to gently stamp it into the back of each cabochon. Now when I do this, I'm going to make sure that the edge of the pupil is close to one edge of each cabochon, instead of just putting them directly in the center. It'll add a little bit more character to the eyes. And those are looking pretty good. Now I'm going to set these aside and I'm going to let them dry. Whenever I make these kind of eyes, because there's so much paint on them, it takes a really long time for them to dry. So I usually do it the day before and give them like a full 24 hours to dry. But if you don't want to wait 24 hours, at least give it a couple hours, and you can like stick them out in the sun or something like that, and they'll dry quicker that way. But you want them to be 100% dry, because if they're not and you pop them into the owl and then you stick it in the oven, the paint is going to bubble and essentially kind of explode underneath the cabochon, and then you're going to have paint all over your owl. It's going to pull away from the cabochon and it's just going to look really bad and you're going to be very sad. Alright, so now that we got the eyes out of the way, the next thing we are going to do is start the structure of the owl. And I'm going to do that with my aluminum foil here. And then I'm going to start creating the general shape for the owl's body. And basically I want this to be a cylinder shape with a domed top and a completely flat bottom, if that makes sense. So when you're done, it should look a little something like this. All right, and then I'm gonna take some more aluminum foil here, and I'm going to start shaping the head. And I want this to be obviously wider than the width of the body. And I want it to be as perfect of an oval as possible. All right, now once you got the head shape, set that aside. And we're going to grab our Super Sculpey here and take a little bit out, and then we're going to cover the body and the head with the Super Sculpey. And I'm just going to condition it here a little bit, get it nice and soft. And then I'm just going to flatten it out with my fingers and apply it to my aluminum foil. And do this one. All right, now when you do this, it doesn't have to be perfectly smooth and immaculate. It just needs to be on there because there's going to be so much detail that you're adding to these owls and like feathers and stuff that it really doesn't matter how perfect your first layer of Sculpey is. All right, now we're going to do this one, cover that in Super Sculpey the same way we did the other one, and then just smooth it out the best we can. All right, those are looking pretty good. Now the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to attach the head to the body. And this is where your one toothpick comes in handy. And I'm just gonna poke this directly into the top center of my owl body. And then I'm gonna add a little bit of bacon bond to kind of reinforce the bond between the two pieces. All right, now I'm going to press the head onto the toothpick that's sticking out of the body, and I'm going to make sure that it is as centered and symmetrical as possible. And of course, you want to pick the good side of the head to be the front, so make sure you take note of that when you're doing this. All right, now that's looking good. We have our head and our body attached. So the boring part's over, now it's time for the fun stuff. So the next thing we need to do is we need to finish the eyes and add them to the head. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my large ball stylus, and I'm just going to kind of create two craters in the head of the owl where I want the eyes to go, making sure they're even and straight across from each other, and one's not higher than the other. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my glow-in-the-dark clay, and I'm going to take a little bit of it and add it to the back of each cabochon. And there's the secret here. That's how you get these glow-in-the-dark eyes. And make sure, again, that you don't do this until the pupils are completely dry. All right, now we got our glow-in-the-dark clay on the back here. And I'm just going to press that eye into the crater I created on the owl. And I'm going to make sure that the side where the pupil is closest to is inward towards where the mouth is going to go. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the other eye here. And I'm going to position it again so that the pupil is closer to the edge that is closer to the middle of the face, as you can see here. All right, so that's looking good. I'm just gonna kind of smooth out these eye sockets here a little bit. Make sure they're touching the cabochons. And that's looking pretty good. All right, now the next part is the painstaking part that you really have to have patience with. And basically what you're gonna do is you're going to start the feathers. And to do the feathers, you're gonna have to ball up millions of tiny pieces of clay and add them one at a time around the owl. So I'm going to start doing that here. I mean, you can make a ton of little balls all at once at first and then just pick them up and add them, but I like to just make them as I go. And that's what I'll be doing here. So I'm going to start here towards the front of the owl here, place a ball of clay, and spread it into the body like that. And I'm just going to repeat this process 50 million times until the entire owl is covered. Alright, now once you get to the second row of feathers and you hit the middle, it's time to stop and make the tail. Now the tail consists of three feathers that are placed together. You're going to have one feather in the middle. This is going to be the largest one, and I'm making that by rolling out this teardrop shape and then flattening it, and then doing the same thing twice for the smaller feathers on each side of that. And then once I have that, I'm going to add some feather details on the other side and then attach it to the back of the owl. And then just to add another level of reinforcement, I like to use a little bit of Bacon Bond right where the back of the tail meets the owl's body. And you're good to go. There's your tail. And now it's time to finish up the feathers on the owl's body. And then when you get to the top row of feathers, I'm just going to add the balls as is to that, and then I'm going to use my spoon tool to smooth those out at the top because I can't fit my finger in that area. And the feathers on the body are looking good. And now it's time to finish the feathers on the owl's head. Alright, now we're towards the top of the head now on the owl. And this part, I'm going to make sure that as I work towards the front of the owl's face, I want the feathers to get smaller so that the ones by its beak are the smallest and the ones towards the back of its head are the same size as the other ones on its back. I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. And just kind of follow this to know how to lay out the feathers on the top of the head and on the face. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Now the next step here is we are going to add the feathers around the eyes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Super Sculpey, get a little bit off there, and I'm just going to roll out a snake that tapers at the end of each side of it. And then once I have that, I'm just going to place it loosely around the owl's eye, make sure it's perfectly round, trim off any excess, and then blend the two ends together. Then I'm going to repeat this step on the other side. Alright, now once you have the eye feathers laid out, it's time to create the feathering effect. And I'm going to use my arrowhead tool to do that. And I'm just swiftly going to create these little markings all around the circumference of the owl's eye, starting with the right eye. And then each stroke, start at the bottom and work your way up. And as you work up, make sure that you're pulling a little bit of the clay to create the somewhat jagged edges so it's not just perfectly round. And I'm going to do 2 rows of this around each eye. Alright, that's looking pretty good. I'm happy with it. Alright, now the next step here is I'm going to do the space where the head meets the body, and I'm just going to roll out another snake out of my Super Sculpey. Add that, stretching from side to side of the owl's head. And then I'm going to blend the top of it in with the clay that's already on his head using my spoon tool. Alright, and then I'm going to create a texture here for the feathers again with my arrowhead tool. And I'm just doing a bunch of rows and then making it look as random as possible so it's not just like a bunch of straight lines across. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Now the next step here is to make the beak. Now the beak can be a little tricky if you're doing it for the first time, but I promise you it's easy and you'll get it eventually if you don't get it the first time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my medium ball stylus and I'm going to press out an oval shape where I want the beak to go. And this oval shape needs to be big enough to house both the bottom beak and the top beak. Now I'm going to take my translucent clay and I'm going to create the lower beak. And to do that, I'm just balling up a piece of the translucent clay, rolling it to a point on my surface, and then pressing it down to flatten it, and then bringing it to a point. Now before I add this to the owl, I'm going to add a little bit of bacon bond into that impression that I made, just to kind of reinforce it a little bit more so it doesn't break off easily or anything. And once we have that in there, I'm going to add the lower beak. Like that. And then I'm going to use my medium ball stylus to press it in and create a little indentation for where the tongue is going to go. Alright, now the next step, once you have that in there, is to create the tongue. And basically the tongue is just a mini version of the lower beak. So just using a lot less clay, and you want it to be a lot flatter, obviously. But it's the same sculpting process for it. So I'm just going to take a tiny ball of clay, roll it to a point on one end, and then press it down to flatten it. Then pick that up and add it to the center of the lower beak. Now we're halfway there on the beak, which is awesome. And now it's time to make the top beak. And I'm just going to shape out the beak in my fingers here, kind of bring it to a point and curve it like that. And then I'm going to add it right above the tongue and lower beak, obviously. All right, now once that's in there, I'm going to take my small ball stylus and I'm going to create the nostrils right at the top here. All right, cool, that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to just add another small piece of clay, arching over the entire top beak like that, and then blend it in and use my arrowhead tool to create more feather texture on that. All right, cool, our owl's head is completely done. All right, now before we put the wings on, I'm going to texture the chest using my arrowhead tool. And I'm just going to lose my mind and add a ton of little detail strokes until the whole thing is covered. All right, that's looking pretty good. I wish I really was doing it that fast. Now it's time to do the wings. Basically, take a ball of clay, roll it to a longer point than we were doing with the beak just a second ago. And you're going to have this elongated teardrop shape like that. And then I'm just going to press that into my surface to flatten it out. And then I'm going to repeat that process 2 more times, getting smaller each time. And then I'm going to layer that on top of my larger feather. And then I'm going to do that 1 more time for this side, even smaller, and layer that on top of the other one. All right, now we got the wings done for one side of the owl, and it's time to do the exact same thing 1 more time, but make sure that you're mirroring it, obviously, because you don't want both of the wings to go the same way. So do that, repeat the whole process, and you're good to go. All right, now I'm going to take my little dental kind of tool, or a pen tool, and I'm just going to draw some feather details on the wings. And I'm just drawing a straight line down the center of each feather, and then adding some diagonal lines on each side of that, leaving a space in between each group of those to create this cartoon style feather. All right, that's looking pretty good. We're gonna repeat that on the other side now. Now first, before I attach these, I'm going to add some bacon bond to either side of the owl's chest, and then attach the wings, and the bacon bond is obviously going to reinforce the connection of the wings to the body. All right, now once you got both of your wings placed, you want to make sure you curve them a little bit, and we're looking good. Okay, now once we got the wings on, the last thing we have to add, or the second to last thing we're going to add, is the feet. So I'm going to put a little bit of bacon bond at the bottom of where the feet are going to go. Take my translucent clay, create 2 little balls for each foot, and then I'm going to press them together and place them right over the bacon bond. And then I'm going to use my brush that I always use for bacon bond, and I'm just gonna swipe off the excess that I don't want. All right, now the last thing to do is the extra feathers on the head. I don't know what they're called. Are they like the pointy feathers on an owl? At the top they kind of look like ears, but they're not ears. So if anybody knows what these are called, let me know. So I'm gonna add some bacon bond to the owl's head on either side where I want to place these. And then I'm going to sculpt 2 little mini pyramids and then place it on top of that, like so, and then flatten them a little bit in the front so they're more even with the surface of the owl's head. All right, our owl is looking pretty good and he is ready to go in the oven. So I'm gonna go bake this guy and I will be right back. All right, our owl is all baked and ready for paint. Now we're gonna take our black and white acrylic paint here, and I'm gonna mix them together to create a dark gray color. Mix it, mix it, mix it, mix it, mix it till I get to a point that I like. All right, that seems to look pretty good. Now I'm going to just paint the entire surface of the owl with my larger paintbrush, and then when I get close to areas where I don't want paint, I'm going to switch the paintbrush out for my fine-tipped one to increase accuracy. If you get any on the eyes, don't worry, just wait for it to completely dry, and you can just take you could take a toothpick or one of your sculpting tools and just kind of scratch it off. You're not going to ruin the cabochon. But just wait for the paint to completely dry before you do that. All right, our whole owl is dark gray. Now it's time for the fun part, and this is where we add lighter versions of the same gray to create dimension on the feathers. And to do this, I'm just going to mix more white with the gray that I already have here. And then I'm going to dip my paintbrush in it, kind of get some of that excess paint off so you don't want to glob it on or anything. And then I'm going to add it to the owl by painting it in upward strokes. Like that. Nice and swift. And I'm going to do that over the entire surface of the owl, and then when I get to the wings, I'm just going to kind of stay at the bottom here of each wing, and then the same thing with the tail. And then don't forget the little ear feather things, or whatever they're called. And then being extra careful around the eyes and the beak. That's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to wait for this to completely dry, and then I'm going to go over this again using the same process with an even lighter gray. So I'm going to take some more white, and then when I add this to the owl, I'm just going to stay concentrated on the facial area and the wings, the tail, and the chest. I'm not going to go over the whole back again because I want there to be dimension, and I want all the focus to be on the owl's face. And if you see owls, I don't know, like their faces are usually lighter than the rest of their bodies. So that's another factor. Just gonna go over everything like that. And then wait for that to completely dry, because that's looking really good. I'm really happy with it. And then once that's completely dry, I'm going to lighten the gray even more, almost to the point of being completely white, or actually just using straight up white, and then adding it to the edges of the eye feathers, like that, tips of the wings, upper chest. All right, our owl's feathers are completely painted and they're looking so good. I'm really happy with this one. Now the last thing that's left to do is we have to paint the beak and the feet. And I'm going to do that by mixing some yellow and orange together with my fine paintbrush. And then I'm going to start coating the beak. And I want this to be a fairly thin coat because I want some of that translucency to still show through from the translucent clay. I don't want to just completely coat it. Now for the feet, being careful not to mess up all of the hard work we just put into painting the body. Looking good. All right, beak and feet are painted. Now, last thing, we gotta paint the tongue. And I'm just going to add some red paint to the gray that I have here because I want it to be dull. I want it to be a little dull. I don't want it to be like straight up pink in your face. I want it to be more natural. Adding it, the red to the gray paint does this for me. I just mix it till I get a shade that I like. And I'm liking that one. And then I'm going to carefully paint the entire surface of the tongue. And once you're done with that, you are done. Ta-da! Looks pretty good, doesn't he? And then once everything is completely dry, take a paper towel or cotton cloth and just kind of polish out the eyeballs, but he's looking pretty good. I'm happy with him. All right, that's a wrap, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to hit subscribe. I'm trying to post videos as frequently as possible. And don't forget the t-shirts. Remember, they're linked below if you want one. And follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Ace of Clay. And I'm also on Pinterest and Twitter too, but thanks for watching.